There comes a point in life when the dynamics between parents and children begin to change. For years, you've been raising them, guiding them, and making sacrifices. But then, at some moment, you realize things aren't the same anymore. Perhaps they start disregarding your advice, ignoring your opinions, or speaking to you condescendingly. Worse, they might make you feel like a burden, and that can be painful. If your children have begun treating you with less respect than you deserve, it can be frustrating and even anger-inducing. You might want to remind them of all the years you put them first and all you've done for them. But here's the reality: getting angry won't solve the problem. In fact, it often makes matters worse. There is, however, a far more effective approach to regain their respect, without fighting, without arguments, and without resentment. Today, I'm going to share 6 strategies you can use when your children don't respect you. These are simple, powerful changes in how you respond, and they can completely alter how your children perceive you. Some of these may surprise you, but if you stay with me until the end, you'll learn how to restore your role as a respected and valued figure in their lives. Before we start, we ask you to like the video and leave a comment to help the channel grow. Subscribe and activate the notification bell to stay updated on our content. Now, let's begin. Action 1. Stop seeking their approval. One of the biggest mistakes parents, especially as they grow older, make is trying too hard to please their children. Maybe you've found yourself doing this. You make extra effort to accommodate them. You say yes when you'd rather say no. You prioritize their needs over your own, hoping that by doing so, they'll appreciate you more. But here's a hard truth: the more you seek their approval, the less respect you'll get. Do you see what I mean? Respect is not earned through self-sacrifice, it's earned through self-respect. If you're always bending over backward, always giving in, always trying to maintain the peace, what you're teaching them is that your feelings come last. And once they start believing that, it becomes easy for them to take you for granted. I once knew a woman named Margaret, who was a strong and independent person when she was younger. But as she grew older, she started allowing her children to make all the decisions. She rearranged her life to accommodate their needs, kept her opinions to herself, and ignored the way they spoke to her. "I just want to keep the family together," she told me. But what ended up happening? Her children stopped valuing her. They saw her as someone who would always adjust, always agree, always stay silent. She thought she was maintaining peace, but in reality, she was losing her voice. If your children don't respect you, the first step isn't to demand respect. It's to stop acting like you need it. Establish boundaries. Say no when necessary. Speak your mind, even if they don't like what you have to say. When you begin respecting yourself, they'll start to see you in a new light, and that respect will eventually return. Action 2. Don't argue, lead by example. When your children dismiss your opinions, talk over you, or treat you disrespectfully, your instinct may be to argue. You may want to remind them of everything you've done for them, to demand that they listen. But let me tell you something that will save you years of frustration: arguing doesn't work. Think about it: when was the last time you convinced someone to respect you by fighting for it? Respect isn't earned through words, it's earned through presence, through the way you carry yourself, through how you react when others test your patience. If you respond to disrespect with anger, all you're doing is reinforcing their belief that they have power over you. I once knew a man named Frank, a retired teacher who had spent his life leading a classroom with authority. But at home, his adult children began treating him like an afterthought. They ignored his advice, dismissed his concerns, and sometimes laughed when he tried to correct them. At first, Frank argued back, trying to prove that he still deserved their respect. But the more he fought, the worse things got. Then, one day, Frank made a change. Instead of arguing, he began listening, really listening. He stopped trying to gain respect through words and began acting as if he already had it. He spoke with calm authority and wisdom, without the need to prove himself. Slowly, his children began to notice. They saw a man who wasn't desperate for their approval, who didn't need to prove anything, who simply was a figure of strength. If your children don't respect you, don't try to fight for it. Show them what respect looks like by the way you treat yourself. Maintain your dignity, speak with confidence, And, most importantly, never stoop to their level. When you stand your ground with grace, they will feel it, and over time, they'll begin to follow your example. If you're still watching and finding this helpful, please comment number 2 below to let me know you're here. And if you haven't subscribed yet, I recommend you do so and turn on the bell notifications so you don't miss any videos. Your support helps us continue creating valuable content to inform and inspire you. Now, let's continue. Action 3. Detach your emotional dependency. One of the hardest lessons to learn as you grow older is that you can't rely on your children for emotional fulfillment. You may love them deeply, and you may want them to love and respect you in return, but the moment they sense that you need them to feel valued, the power dynamic in the relationship changes. Here's the truth: people, including your children, respect those who are emotionally independent. When you depend on them for validation, affection, or attention, it creates pressure, and instead of feeling thankful, they start feeling burdened. They may begin to pull away or treat you with impatience or even frustration. The more you chase their love, the less freely they'll offer it. I once knew a woman named Helen, a kind mother who had given everything for her children. As they got older and more involved in their own lives, she found herself waiting by the phone, hoping they would call. When they didn't, she would call them. She often reminded them how much she missed them and how she wished they would visit more. But instead of bringing them closer, it drove them away. They began to see her calls as an obligation, not something they looked forward to. Then, one day, Helen did something different. She stopped waiting. She stopped calling them first and instead focused on herself, taking up new hobbies, going out with friends, and prioritizing her own happiness. And something surprising happened. Her children started calling more. They began respecting her time, seeing her as someone with a full life of her own. The lesson here is clear: the less you rely on your children to make you feel needed, the more they will value your presence. When you show them that you can stand strong independently, they will respect you, not out of obligation, but because they truly admire the life you've built for yourself. Action 4. Set boundaries and enforce them. One of the biggest reasons children lose respect for their parents is because parents allow it. If you let your children talk to you disrespectfully, dismiss your opinions, or treat you as if your time and feelings don't matter, they will keep doing it. Not because they are bad people, but because people, especially family, will always treat you the way you permit them to. Setting boundaries doesn't mean cutting off your children or creating conflict. It means calmly and firmly deciding what behavior you will and won't tolerate. And more importantly, it means enforcing those boundaries when they're crossed. I remember a man named Robert, a retired businessman who spent his life running a company with discipline and confidence. But when it came to his adult children, he struggled. They interrupted him when he spoke, dismissed his concerns, and even criticized how he lived his life. At first, he tolerated it, telling himself it wasn't worth the fight. But over time, he realized that by staying silent, he was teaching them that their behavior was acceptable. So, one day, Robert changed his approach. When his son interrupted him, he calmly said, "I'll continue speaking when you're ready to listen." When his daughter dismissed his opinion, he simply replied, "You don't have to agree with me, but I expect you to respect me." And when they continued to push his boundaries, he made it clear that if they couldn't treat him with basic respect, he wouldn't spend time with them. And you know what happened? They started listening. At first, they resisted, but over time, they realized their father wasn't backing down. They saw that he valued himself enough to demand respect, and because of that, they began to give it to him. If your children don't respect you, it's time to ask yourself, are you allowing it? Because if you don't set boundaries, they won't set them for you. And if you don't stand up for yourself, no one else will. If you're still watching and finding these insights helpful, please comment number 4 below to let me know you're here. And if you haven't subscribed yet, I recommend subscribing and turning on the bell notifications so you don't miss any future videos. Your support enables us to keep creating valuable content to inform and inspire you. Now, let's move on. Action 5. Stop giving without appreciation. One of the quickest ways to lose respect is by continually giving to people who don't appreciate it. As parents, we often do this more than we realize. We offer our time, energy, and support, even when it goes unnoticed, when it's taken for granted, when we're met with nothing but entitlement. But here's the reality: when you give to someone who doesn't show appreciation, you're not fostering love or respect. Instead, you're creating expectation. They stop viewing your kindness as a gift and start feeling entitled to it. And when you stop giving, they don't feel grateful, they feel inconvenienced. I once knew a man named George, a father who had always been generous to his children. He would help them financially whenever they needed it, drop everything to assist them, and even rearrange his life to meet their needs. But instead of gratitude, he was met with complaints. They didn't thank him, they expected more. The worst part was that when he finally needed their help, they were too busy. Then one day, George changed his approach. He stopped overextending himself, stopped offering help before it was asked, and most importantly, he started saying no when he needed to. At first, his children were frustrated and didn't understand why he wasn't bending over backward for them anymore. But over time, things shifted. They began valuing his time and appreciating his efforts, realizing that his generosity wasn't unlimited, it was a gift, not a guarantee. If you feel your children don't respect your time, effort, or kindness, take a step back and ask yourself, are you giving more than you should? And if so, what would happen if you stopped? When you teach people that your generosity depends on respect, they'll start treating it as such. Action 6. Create a life outside of them. One of the most powerful ways to regain your children's respect is by showing them that your happiness doesn't revolve around them. As parents, it's natural to focus on our children and make them the center of our world. But as we age, that dynamic can change. If you've spent your life prioritizing your children, they may start seeing you as someone with nothing else going on. People respect those who have their own purpose, their own interests, and their own sense of fulfillment. If your children feel like you rely on them for entertainment, validation, or meaning, they may begin to feel suffocated or, even worse, see you as someone without a life of their own. I once knew a woman named Eleanor, a widow in her late 70s. After her husband passed, she poured everything into her children's lives, constantly checking in, giving unsolicited advice, and expecting them to fill the void left by her husband. But instead of drawing them closer, it pushed them away. They visited less, their calls became shorter, and Eleanor felt more alone than ever. Then, she made a change. She joined a book club, started traveling with friends, and volunteered at a local community center. She stopped making her children the focus of her life. And something remarkable happened. Her children began reaching out more. They became curious about what she was doing, admired her independence, and, most importantly, respected her. If your children don't respect you, ask yourself, do they see you as someone with a full, meaningful life, or as someone waiting around for their attention? When you show them you are living, not just existing, they will begin to see you in a completely new way. If you're still watching and finding these insights helpful, please comment, number 6, below to let me know you're here. And if you haven't subscribed yet, please do so and turn on the bell notifications so you never miss a video. Your support helps us continue creating great content to inform and inspire you. Final thoughts: respect isn't something you can demand from your children. It's something you inspire through the way you carry yourself, set boundaries, and live your life. If they've started treating you with less care, consideration, or respect, don't waste energy getting angry. Instead, change your approach. Stop chasing their approval, because the less you need it, the more they'll give it. Lead by example, as your dignity speaks louder than any words you say. Become emotionally independent, because the more self-sufficient you are, the more your presence will be respected. Set boundaries, because people will only treat you as well as you expect them to. Stop giving without receiving appreciation, because when your generosity is taken for granted, it loses its value. And most importantly, create a life outside of them, because people respect those who have their own purpose, happiness, and fulfillment. If you implement these changes, something remarkable will happen. Your children will begin to see you in a new light, not as someone who is waiting for their attention, but as someone who commands respect simply by being themselves. In time, that respect will return to you, not because you demanded it, but because you earned it. Thank you for being with us today. We'd love to hear from you. Leave a comment below sharing one thing you learned today and how you plan to apply it in your life. Your thoughts matter to us, so don't hesitate to share. Reading your comments gives us great motivation and encouragement. If you enjoyed this video and found it helpful, please like, subscribe, and share. Your support helps us continue creating great content to inform and inspire you. Thank you for watching, and we look forward to seeing you in the next video.